Well, welcome back. The Faith of Queen Elizabeth, this is part 3. And as William said, the topic today is grace. So that's just a review of our 5 sessions. So we started with duty, and then we did sacrifice. Tonight is grace, and then we'll do compassion, and then finally legacy. So the reading assignment for tonight was chapters 5 and 6, for those of you who have a book. And before I forget, just a reminder for next Wednesday, if you could have read chapters 7 and 8, that would be appreciated. Okay. All right, so just want to start with a brief moment of asking for reflections on your readings. Anything that jumped out at you that you remember that struck you, thought was interesting? Didn't you learn something? Anything like that?
For unwavering belief in Jesus Christ.
That came out to you in these chapters in particular?
Yes.
Particularly in these chapters?
Yes.
Can you say more about that? What was it?
Certainly. She made this quote, "Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever," from Hebrews 13:8. And it was a terrible time for her. She called it her annus horribilis, and she gave up the Britannia. There was the death of Diana. It was a bad time in her life.
Yeah.
Very stressful time, and stressful for the country as well.
But then her faith was what sort of got her through that. Yeah, that seemed to be a thread there, didn't it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Constant.
Yeah.
In her life.
Great. That's right on. Yeah. We'll start with a reading. So he actually referenced 3 different Old Testament stories, and we're gonna look at all 3 of those throughout the evening together. So the first one is the story from Joshua, and this is, of course, as you'll remember, this is sort of right at the time that the Israelites have been. We heard about the Israelites today in the first lesson, wandering for 40 years and eating manna in the wilderness, and then they're about to enter into the promised land, and Moses dies, and then Joshua kind of takes over as the leader of the people. And Delffs referenced this reading in one of the chapters, and in particular the reference to trusting in the Lord to kind of see you through, especially as a leader. So would somebody like to read this for us? Okay, Janice, please.
Joshua 1:1-9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go."
Thank you. So there's a theme there. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. The Lord is with you wherever you go. And as John kind of referenced, this is, I think, very much a theme of some of these years that were mentioned in these chapters. So we're going to start with this famous incident, or not incident, speech, referencing several incidents. This was back in 1992, and she's speaking here to what's called the Corporation of London, and this is a very famous speech that she made. So you'll remember that many things horrible happened in this year. So just prior to this. So let me just rehearse them here. So Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, the Duke and Duchess of York, announced their separation on the 19th of March of this year. And then Princess Anne and Mark Phillips divorced on the 23rd of April. Then fire broke out at Windsor Castle on the 20th of November, which is just, as you can see, just 4 days before she made this speech. But of course, this is all taking place in the context of Charles and Diana's relationship just sort of, being very publicly falling apart. And that was in the news all the time. And I still remember, like every time you go to the grocery store, every newspaper you look at, there would be horrible story. It was just constant, just... Which book? Diana's book?
Diana's book.
Okay, yeah. So lots going on, and then of course just most immediately the fire at Windsor Castle just a few days before this speech. So let's watch a little bit of this famous speech. This is, I think, about 4 minutes. So, but I think it's worth listening to. So let's.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis. I suspect that I'm not alone in thinking it so. Indeed, I suspect that there are very few people or institutions unaffected by these last months of worldwide turmoil and uncertainty. This generosity and wholehearted kindness of the Corporation of the City to Prince Philip and me would be welcome at any time, but at this particular moment, in the aftermath of Friday's tragic fire at Windsor, it is especially so. And after this last weekend, we appreciate all the more what has been set before us today. Years of experience, however, have made us a bit more canny than the lady less well-versed than us in the splendors of city hospitality, who, when she was offered a balloon glass for her brandy, asked for only half a glass, please. It is possible to have too much of a good thing. A well-meaning bishop was obviously doing his best when he told Queen Victoria, "Ma'am, we cannot pray too often nor too fervently for the royal family." The Queen's reply was, "Too fervently, no. Too often, yes." I, like Queen Victoria, have always been a believer in that old maxim, moderation in all things. I sometimes wonder how future generations will judge the events of this tumultuous year. I dare say that history will take a slightly more moderate view than that of some contemporary commentators. Distance is well known to lend enchantment, even to the less attractive views. After all, it has the inestimable advantage of hindsight. But it can also lend an extra dimension to judgment, giving it a leavening of moderation and compassion, even of wisdom, that is sometimes lacking in the reactions of those whose task it is in life to offer instant opinions on all things, great and small. No section of the community has all the virtues, neither does any have all the vices. I am quite sure that most people try to do their best, to do their jobs as best they can, even if the result is not always entirely successful. He who has never failed to reach perfection has a right to be the harshest critic. There can be no doubt, of course, that criticism is good for people and institutions that are part of public life. No institution, city, monarchy, whatever, should expect to be free from the scrutiny of those who give it their loyalty and support, not to mention those who don't. But we are all part of the same fabric of our national society, and that scrutiny by one part of another can be just as effective if it is made with a touch of gentleness, good humour, and understanding.
So, pretty powerful speech given the context and the amount of stuff that was going on in the ether there. Very direct appeal for some compassion, I think, and some sort of consideration. And everybody has problems, and they do too. The theme, of course, is grace, right, of tonight's talk, and I think that it's a very poignant, very direct speech, but I think I would argue she's exhibiting a great deal of grace there. There's not a hint of anger or ill will towards people. She's just being very forthright and saying, we're all in this together, and let's treat each other with a bit of compassion. So, as we know, there was a few other things, well, many other things, but a couple other really big things that would come her way in the coming years, and one in particular was this. So, we'll remember the shock of this event, as well as the fallout from it for her and for the royal family. We'll remember that there was some concern about the way that they initially reacted to the news and the way she eventually would come to address it. So I just got a very short clip here just to sort of refresh our memories of the shock of this. This is just less than a minute here. This is before that it was known that Diana was dead. It was just the news flash that she had been in an accident.
This is BBC One. We've interrupted our programmes for a news report. We now go over to Martin Lewis in the news studio.
We interrupt this film to tell you we are getting reports that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been badly injured in a car crash in France. French radio is saying that the accident happened in western Paris when the car she was travelling in collided with another vehicle in a tunnel. The princess is reported to have been taken to hospital. There is no news of her condition, and as yet the report is unconfirmed. It's also reported that a passenger in the princess's car was killed. One report, quoting French police, says it is her friend Dudley Al-Fayed. It's also reported that the driver of the princess's car was killed. I repeat that these reports are unconfirmed. We will bring you more news as soon as we have it.
Could hear his voice wavering a bit there at the end, couldn't you? Yeah. When Carolyn and I were in Paris this past summer, and we didn't go in the tunnel, but you can see there's sort of a gold statue on top of the tunnel, which is just coincidence, I think. I think the statue predates this, but it just sort of happens to mark the spot where this happened. And this is a later broadcast where it becomes clear that she's died.
What is your view of what is now happening at the hospital?
Well, I'm worried by the lack of any news or the lack of any statement. I mean, we've got this report about the concussion and about the broken arm and about the cuts to her thigh, but I think it is slightly disturbing that we haven't had some sort of official communique giving the state of health and giving some indication of what might happen next. I don't think that's a terribly encouraging sign. As I say, superficially, concussion, a broken arm, lacerations of the thigh shouldn't give enormous cause for concern, but one wonders if one is being told the whole truth at the moment.
Stephen, I have to interrupt there. because within the last few moments, the Press Association in Britain, citing unnamed British sources, has reported that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died. This is not yet confirmed by any official source. So an unconfirmed source from the Press Association is that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died. And as soon as there is any further news, we will bring it to you.
Again, you can hear that in his voice, and he's sort of a very unflappable person, but he's sort of scrambling there for words. It's just shocking. As we know, this... oops.
May I say right away how
Sorry.
very sorry I am. And that the thoughts...
As we know, this horrible event would obviously be very trying for the entire royal family, but in particular for the Queen, as she came under a lot of criticism for how she initially handled this. And so this is a little fictionalized sort of account of Tony Blair talking to the Queen, which he did, and he has, the real Tony Blair has actually talked about this, but here we see in the movie The Queen, so this is not The Crown, but this is the movie from 2006, The Queen, him talking to her and trying to convey to her the importance of some kind of public response, which he is initially resistant to.
That my family are with you at this terrible time, and with the princess in particular.
Thank you.
Is it your intention to make some kind of appearance or statement?
No, certainly not. No member of the royal family will speak publicly about this. This is a private matter. We would all appreciate it if it could be respected as such.
I see. I don't suppose anyone's had time to think about the funeral yet.
Well, we've spoken with the Spencer family, and it is their wish, it is their express wish that this should be a private funeral, with a memorial service to follow in a month or so.
Right.
Given that Diana was no longer a member of the royal family, we have no other choice but to respect their wishes.
I see.
You don't feel that in view of her high profile and popularity...
It might be an idea to pay tribute to her life and achievements. Or even just to her as a mother.
Well, as I said, it's her family's wish.
And the public, ma'am? The British people?
You don't think a private funeral might be denying them a chance?
A chance to what?
To share in the grief?
This is a family funeral, Mr. Blair, not a fairground attraction. I think the princess has already paid a high enough price for exposure to the press, don't you? Now, if there's nothing else, I must get on. The children have to be looked after.
Of course.
Well, goodbye, Your Majesty.
So, interesting. I mean, it does. So when there is an interview with the real Tony Blair where I don't know whether the words are all the same, but he did have this kind of conversation with her to try to make her see it in a different way. And we see this time and time again. We looked at this last week too, where she responds to criticism and then does change her approach. So this is a few days later. So Diana died on the 27th, I believe, of August, and this is on the 5th when she did come around and start to understand the importance of being seen to be making some kind of allowing the world and the nation to kind of participate in this process of grief. So here's a little bit of that speech.
Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death. We have all been trying in our different ways to cope. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings: disbelief, incomprehension, anger, and concern for those who remain. We have all felt those emotions in these last few days. So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself.
She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered. No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her, but felt they knew her, will remember her. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. I share in your determination to cherish her memory. This is also an opportunity for me, on behalf of my family, and especially Prince Charles and William and Harry, to thank all of you who have brought flowers, sent messages, and paid your respects in so many ways to a remarkable person. These acts of kindness have been a huge source of help and comfort. Our thoughts are also with Diana's family and the families of those who died with her. I know that they too have drawn strength from what has happened since last weekend, as they seek to heal their sorrow and then to face the future without a loved one. I hope that tomorrow we can all, wherever we are, join in expressing our grief at Diana's loss and gratitude for her all too short life. It is a chance to show to the whole world the British nation united in grief and respect. May those who died rest in peace, and may we, each and every one of us, thank God for someone who made many, many people happy.
What do you make of that speech? What do you make of that, given the context, given this conversation that she had earlier, a few days earlier, with the Prime Minister? What's your thoughts?
Well, just what you said, that she listened to the criticism and she came around.
Yeah.
Do we know who made the decision that little Harry, who was 12, had to walk behind his mother's coffin? And
Don't know.
because he subsequently, now as an adult, says that should never have happened. It was almost like, did they go too far to give them what the people wanted? So she went from defending them and being very private to somehow Harry, had that ordeal of walking behind his mother's coffin all that way, and subsequently he said that should never have happened. So.
Yeah, well, we've seen this all along, haven't we? This tension between the private family, kind of normal family thing, and then, but also this public duty, and it's an impossible job, really. Yeah.
I think subsequently, when there have been various first-hand accounts from those close to the Queen and other members of the royal family, we have to recognize that in all likelihood, in that brief time at Balmoral, both the Queen herself and King Charles probably did bring, draw from their own wells of compassion and understanding with those 2 boys. I don't think we can dismiss that.
No, not at all.
And of course, none of us were present, and very few others. There was, generally speaking, such broad condemnation of Queen Elizabeth, right afterwards. But on a very personal sense, I think the likelihood is that she and Charles, probably as parent and grandparent, did offer as much consolation as they could, and that was probably consuming them too. And so to deliver such a speech so directly and calmly and with apparent sincerity, all in, a short period of time after all this happened.
Yeah.
I think perhaps one ought to commend her for that.
Grace. I see. And I don't want to get into a Diana bashing thing, but like there was a lot of baggage there, right? And so there's a lot of probably, I wouldn't blame the Queen for having probably a lot of mixed feelings about Diana. I think we can assume that's the case. So to be able to kind of go on and be able to present this speech, which is pretty measured and compassionate, I think it was, I'm sure, a difficult thing to do.
I think her concern from the beginning was her grandchildren.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think Delffs I believe he talked about that, didn't he? That she was really more focused on trying to protect them, and then she had this pressure. Well, you have to go and make this a public thing, and yeah.
The other thing that he said that I thought was interesting was there was this outcry about the flag not being flown at half-mast at Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yet it's never, ever
been flown at. I think it's not what it's for. It's just to show that she's in residence, right?
So
and then
they kind of bent protocol. Just that one, just to sort of.
Just they kind of bent to public pressure because people didn't understand that. Yeah, I remember that too. Okay, well, let's move on now to the next reading. So there's a longish reading from 1 Samuel, chapter 17. There's 2 pages that go together. This is the story of David and Goliath, and I've just edited it a bit. Could somebody read it for us, or read half of it? David? Perfect.
Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of Ephronite of Bethlehem in Judea, named Jesse. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth." And David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." And Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped his sword over his armor. And he tried in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them." So David put them off. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. And the Philistine was moved forward and came near to David, with his shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. And the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. The battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. When the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David.
Okay, thank you, David. The other famous David. As we know, this is a very famous story, of course, of David, and one of the first sort of battles that he would have to go through. But of course, he would go through many more after this. And like David, Queen Elizabeth also had her own share of battles, which we are going to look at a few of those now. And these were referenced in Delffs' book. So Louis Mountbatten was the first Earl Mountbatten of Burma. He was assassinated by somebody working for the IRA in 1979. And okay, so he was the great-grandson of Queen Victoria, second cousin to Queen Elizabeth, and uncle to Prince Philip. And as we all know, I think also a very cherished person to then Prince Charles, sort of a kind of a role model for him. So he was killed by the IRA by a bomb, and here's just a little news clip talking about that.
It's 7 o'clock and we join Len Jackson at the news desk.
A day of tragic violence in Ireland. Lord Mountbatten of Burma has been killed by an explosion on his yacht off the Republic's coast. And in the north, 6 soldiers have died in an ambush. The Provisional IRA have already said they killed Lord Mountbatten. The blast also killed one of his grandsons and a friend, and injured 4 other members of the family. Here's our Dublin correspondent, Philip Whitfield.
Earl Mountbatten set out on his 29-foot yacht Shadow 5 from Mullaghmore Harbour at about 10:30 this morning. Local people say the yacht was about 100 yards from the shore when there was a massive explosion, throwing everyone on board into the sea. Close by was a fishing boat and the skipper was the first to the scene. But the yacht was in fragments. As more people joined in the rescue, Earl Mountbatten's body was recovered from the water, together with the body of his grandson Nicholas and a 15-year-old friend, Paul Maxwell, from Enniskillen in Northern Ireland. The 4 survivors were taken to the village and transferred to Sligo Hospital. Lady Braben, her mother-in-law, the Dowager Lady Braben, and Nicholas's twin brother Timothy are said to be critically ill. Lord Braben is seriously ill. Earl Mountbatten and his family party and friends arrived in Sligo 3 weeks ago for their annual holiday at Classybourne Castle, which has been in the Mountbatten family for many years.
The Queen heard the news at Balmoral Castle. She was said to be deeply shocked.
Okay, so that's one of the horrific events that the family faced. Another one that is mentioned by Delffs is this one. This is the shooting incident during the Trooping of the Colour, and this is just a short clip. This is a BBC document. I think it's BBC. It's a documentary that was made, and they're showing Charles. I think he's still Prince Charles at this point. They're showing him some footage of this, and he comments on it just very briefly. But it's actually kind of cute to see what he says.
Field Marshal His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Edinburgh Colonel of the Grenadier Guards.
You heard that? Yeah.
Hello, some little disturbance in the approach road. Burmese receiving a reassuring pat from Her Majesty the Queen, but he's a very experienced, wise old fellow.
And she's a marvellous rider, so she's got a marvellous way with horses. Made of strong stuff, you know.
It's sort of nice, the affection in when he says that, I can tell there's a lot of affection there for her. So this, of course, was a British guy who fired, it was actually 6 blanks, so they weren't real bullets, but it was obviously a threat, and even if it was kind of a harmless one, it was certainly an assault. And then there's also this one. This is the Michael Fagan incident. So this guy broke into Buckingham Palace twice, actually. He broke in July of '82, and he spent a couple hours walking around eating, drinking stuff off of trays, and I think he kind of left sort of unnoticed, surprisingly. And then he came back again on the 9th of July, a few days later, and this is the one that's sort of famous, and it was depicted in The Crown, I think it was The Crown, by the actors. They sort of made a scene there, which may or may not be accurate, but this is just a short little couple-minute long review of that situation. So.
It will go down in history as one of the 20th century's worst security breaches, when a then 32-year-old Michael Fagan broke into Buckingham Palace, not once, but twice, and came within meters of the Queen. This scene is shown in Netflix's The Crown in Season 4, where Her Majesty finds herself rudely awoken by an intruder
and has to wait for her security to intervene. In 1982, Michael Fagan had his encounter with Queen Elizabeth. A month earlier, he'd managed to break into the palace and spend, by his account, a good few hours looking around the place before he was disturbed by a maid. Fagan at that time made a swift exit. But on his second break-in, he was in no hurry to leave. After all, he had a private audience with Her Majesty. At around 7 a.m. on the 9th of July in 1982, Fagan scaled Buckingham Palace's 14-foot-high wall, which was topped with spikes and barbed wire. He then climbed up a drain pipe before wandering into the Queen's bedroom 15 minutes later. An alarm sensor had detected his movements inside the palace, but police thought the alarm was faulty and silenced it. Fagan wandered the palace corridors for several minutes before reaching the section where the royal apartments were located. The Queen woke when Fagan disturbed a curtain. Initial reports said he had sat on the edge of her bed. A duty footman walking the Queen's corgis finally appeared, followed by 2 policemen who at last removed Fagan. However, by other accounts, it was said that the Queen managed to leave the room immediately to get her security. Michael Fagan's own memory was a lot less clear.
I don't know if I went into the Queen's bedroom. I don't really know. I went into her room, I remember seeing a lady. I can't really say that even if it was the Queen.
Mr. Fagan, do you think after your treatment in Park Lane Hospital now that your state of mind is such that you would not do that again?
Yeah, I'm 100% recovered, I've got my children, I'm quite happy.
But his own mother shed some light on the reason behind his break-in at the palace.
Did he explain to you why he went to the palace like that?
Well, he said he'd gone there to prove a point.
What do you think he meant by that?
I think he meant that he went there to do it just to let people know that it could be done.
Since at the time it was a civil wrong rather than a criminal offence, Fagan was not charged for trespassing in the Queen's bedroom. He was charged, however, with theft, but the charges were dropped when he was committed for psychiatric evaluation. He spent the next 3 months in a psychiatric hospital before being released on the 21st of January 1983.
So, kind of shocking that he was allowed to do that twice, and the first time not even sort of being caught. Do you remember that, when that happened?
It will go to...
Yeah. And I'm surprised he was able to walk. You would think that there would be sort of locked doors throughout the building. Like, he seemed to be able to walk almost the entire length of the building, which is really surprising. And then get right into her personal apartments without encountering a locked door. That's shocking. Okay, one other thing in this sort of category that, I put into this category, we're talking about sort of little battles, and this is the whole thing about the yacht Britannia. So, as you might remember from the reading, when Tony Blair's government was elected, they quashed, there was already a plan in place to do something about the yacht because it was aging, but then once they got elected, they decided we're just done with this. We're not going to replace it. We're not going to fix it. It's over. And this, as I think Delffs points out, it kind of coincides a little bit with, it's almost like a bit of a metaphor for the, it was commissioned right at the beginning of her reign, and then, sort of over the course of this decline of the British Empire that we talked about last week, it's sort of a bit of a metaphor for that. And as we're getting towards the end of that decline, the yacht goes out of service completely. So here's a couple of short little clips. This is the one from the launching of it, and then we'll show one from the decommissioning. These are very short.
Brown's Yard on Clydeside, the 4,000-ton Royal Yacht is ready for launching by Her Majesty. It was at this same yard that the Queen, as Princess Elizabeth, launched the battleship Vanguard in 1944. 3 years later, she named the Coronia. But this is the first launching ceremony she has attended since her accession. Thousands of dock workers, many of whom helped to build the royal craft, give the Queen a warm reception as she walks past them to inspect the yacht. In the event of war, it can be converted quickly to a hospital ship. For many months, there has been speculation about the name of the new yacht, and there's an air of expectancy as Her Majesty steps forward to perform the actual launching ceremony.
I name the ship Britannia. I wish success to her and to all who sail in her.
Her Majesty releases the traditional bottle, not of champagne this time, but of Empire wine. Soon the Britannia will become a home for the Queen, the Duke, and their children.
So she clearly had a lot of affection for this yacht. We actually got to go inside. Has anybody been into the yacht? Because it's docked. Where is it docked? Is it Edinburgh? Yeah. So Carolyn and I, many years ago, we got to go on and tour it, and it's kind of neat to do that. But she clearly had a lot of affection, and as Delffs pointed out, it wasn't just like a private luxury yacht. It was that, but it was also very much used for diplomacy and for business, and there would be meetings there, and it served a very important function. But the political climate was, at the time when the Blair government got elected, was just such that it was really difficult for them to justify spending the millions and millions of dollars that would require to build a new one or fix this one. So it's gone. So here's this is, I find very moving. This is the decommissioning ceremony in '97.
Her days as royal yacht are over. Britannia in Portsmouth tonight, her Union and ensign flags no longer flying. Piped aboard for the final time, the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh came to say goodbye to a yacht whose royal duties spanned nearly half a century. A farewell from 14 members of the royal family: Prince Charles, Prince Edward with his girlfriends Sophie Rhys-Jones, the Duke of York, and the Princess Royal and Captain Lawrence. A piper's finale before the families of those who served and have served on this, the 83rd Royal Yacht. In 1953, the Queen had launched Britannia to wild cheers. Now she and Prince Philip stood close to tears as the Navy paid its final tribute. And so hard now for military composure to fight against emotion. Many of these crew have known no other ship but Britannia. Now they will return to a traditional Navy career. And their Commodore, Anthony Morrow, standing to attention for the final act of decommissioning. the lowering of the ensign and the Union flags. A sad yet graceful end to Britannia's years of royalty.
See the emotion on the sailors' faces, and yeah. So, okay, we're going to go now to the third and final section of tonight. So the reading from Esther. Can somebody do that for us? So you'll remember the story of Esther is a little complex, but she's a Jewish queen married to to a foreign ruler during a time of exile, but she, through various means, she helps save the Jewish population, which was being threatened by the local population with an annihilation. And she's sort of famous for saving her own people through using her own skills of diplomacy and wisdom. And so this is just a short reading from that book. There's a lot to that story. I encourage you to read the whole story yourself, but maybe Kathy, you look like you might want to read. Could you read that for us?
King Ahasuerus
That's good.
gave to Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. And the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Then Esther spoke again to the king. She fell at his feet and wept and pleaded with him to avert the evil plan of Haman the Agagite and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. When the king held out the golden scepter to Esther, Esther rose and stood before the king. And she said, "If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and if the thing seems right before the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the provinces of the king. For how can I bear to see the calamity that is coming to my people? Or how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?" Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they've hanged him on the gallows because he intended to lay hands on the Jews. But you may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king, and seal it with the king's ring, for an edict written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked." Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white, with a great golden crown and a robe of fine linen and purple, and the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor, and in every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict reached, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday, and many from the peoples of the country declared themselves Jews, for fear of the Jews had fallen on them.
So this is the origins of Purim, the Jewish festival. And again, as I say, she saved, so the story goes, she saved the Jews from being massacred. Using her skills, her diplomacy, her wit. And so now we're going to look at a couple of incidents where we see Queen Elizabeth doing that. Here's one that is very charming. This is again from the movie The Queen from 2006. This is the first meeting of Tony Blair with the Queen. And he has talked about, the real Tony Blair has talked about this, and whether it's word for word or not, but it's very similar to what actually happened in real life. So, oops, what did I do?
How nice to see you again, Mr. Blair. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Children must be very proud.
Well, I hope so.
You've 3, haven't you?
That's right.
Oh, how lovely. Such a blessing, children. Please, do sit down.
Thank you.
Have we shown you how to start a nuclear war yet?
No.
Oh, first thing we do, apparently. Then we take away your passport and spend the rest of the time sending you around the world.
You obviously know my job better than I do.
Yes, well, you are my 10th Prime Minister, Mr. Blair. My first, of course, was Winston Churchill. He sat in your chair in frock coat and top hat. He was kind enough to give a shy young girl like me quite an education.
I can imagine.
With time, one has hopefully added experience to that education and a little wisdom, better enabling us to execute our constitutional responsibility. To advise, guide, and warn the government of the day.
Advice which I look forward to receiving.
Yes, well, we'll save that for our weekly meetings. If there's nothing else, I believe we have some business to attend to.
Of course. Your Majesty, my party has won the election, and so I come now to ask your permission to form a government.
No, Mr. Blair. Mr. Blair, I asked the question. The duty falls upon me as your sovereign to invite you to become Prime Minister and to form a government in my name. If you agree, the custom is to say yes.
Yes.
Charming, but it does show her. You know, she's not a pushover, and was really putting him in his place, wasn't she? Okay, how do I get out of this? Yeah.
In effect, he ends up putting her in her.
Yeah,
place.
that's shortly after this. Yeah, because it's the same year, right? So yeah, 97. This is May of 97, and then the whole thing with Diana was in August. So, yeah. One of the other incidents that I think shows her diplomacy and skill was this story of the Ghana visit and the dance with the president or prime minister. I can't remember which one he is, but so Delffs talked about this. But here's a little recap of that story.
A controversial visit that became historic. Accra in November 1961. Bombs had gone off in the city days before the Queen arrived. President Kwame Nkrumah's statue was ripped off. Its remains are today preserved at the Memorial Park in the capital. Ghana was among the first African countries south of the Sahara to gain independence from colonial rule. It became a republic and joined the Commonwealth. But in London, there were fears it was slipping away, and the Soviet Union was gaining ground. So, despite the security concerns, the Queen was keen to go ahead with the long-promised visit, and it was billed as a great success. Kwame Jantua's father was a cabinet minister at the time.
My dad woke us up very early in the morning, and 3 of us, me and my 2 sisters, and the Ashantis had a derba for her. They pulled everything, all the stops. It was a fantastic derba, beautiful derba, colorful derba, talking drums, everything was there. And it left a huge legacy on the minds of Ghanaians for quite a long time.
It was at her farewell banquet that she made history. A dance with the man who replaced her as head of state of Ghana was hugely symbolic. A queen well ahead of her time. But back home, not everyone was ready to embrace the message.
The first black man to dance with the Queen. It's understood that when the picture was published in a newspaper in the UK, it was withdrawn from circulation.
Here in Ghana, it struck a chord.
If the Queen visited here and it was treated like, oh, this is not quite a country, it's a second-grade one, then I don't think the Commonwealth would have grown the way it did. I don't think the atmosphere that has sustained the Commonwealth would ever have happened. I think it was critical for the survival of the Commonwealth that that visit was such a roaring success.
After the dance, the Queen would have come here to the Christian castle in Osu, gone up that staircase in her flowing gown and into her bedroom, which is right behind me. In fact, the bed she slept in that night is still here, preserved to this day. And in the morning, she would have come to this balcony where I'm standing. The impact of her visit has also been felt across generations through the Akosombo Dam, the main source of power for Ghana and her neighbors. It was the centerpiece of President Nkrumah's economic plan. The Queen helped find the funding to build it. And this is the lasting legacy of a royal visit that almost didn't happen. Anne Soy, BBC News, Accra.
So it's sort of interesting that the power of the monarch to do that, and something that a politician probably couldn't pull off. But this little dance was dramatized in The Crown in a sort of a humorous way. So I thought I would just share that clip with you as well. This is a short little.
I think we both understand the significance of this moment.
Yes. But do we understand the terms?
They appear to be in some kind of negotiation.
What kind of negotiation?
Get her out of there.
Your Majesty.
Oh, Lord.
What's going on?
He's taken her hand. They're dancing.
Our Queen is dancing, sir. With an African.
What? Was this agreed?
Was this agreed?
This was definitely not agreed. What are they doing?
What are they doing?
Hard to say. I believe it's the foxtrot.
The foxtrot, sir.
So that's kind of cute. Did you catch what she said when they first approached, and he said something about, what did he say? We both understand the significance of this, and she said, yes, but do we agree on the terms, or something like that? What does she mean by that, do you think? Any ideas?
The positioning of his hands and the closeness.
I think
There's
it's
a
more
lot of respect given to the Queen. You're not around the Queen. You're not allowed to do certain things. You're not actually allowed to touch her.
Yeah.
And so the fact that she was dancing with him was far more significant than if he does dance with a white woman.
Yes, but I think there's more to it than that. I think it's a political level as well.
it's about he's going to support her. There is a mutual benefit to both of them, him supporting the Commonwealth and her supporting his presidency.
Because this whole trip, or at least the way was because there was a fear that they were moving closer to the Soviet Union, and they're trying to keep them within kind of the Western influence, and so exactly, yeah. And again, so thinking of Esther and this grace that she's exhibiting as sort of a kind of a political, doing some politics here in a way, but for the greater good.
You're showing us that clip before this of what it meant. I mean, that's what she's talking about, is that this act is going to really do a lot for the future of the country. I mean, maybe she couldn't have foresaw all of that, but clearly.
Well, the dam that they built and that she got the funding for and everything, and keeping them within that sort of this orbit, and building, I can imagine, it's sort of difficult for us to imagine now, but I can imagine just the racial issue too was very, very kind of shocking to people and so on. So, okay, well, one more clip for you and then we'll be done. This is just a clip from her 2002 Christmas address, and this one, she's quite overt in her talking about her personal faith and the role that it's played throughout her life and her reign, and this is just about 1 minute and 20 seconds long, but I thought it would be a nice way to end, so here we go. Oh, and this is, by the way, 2002 is the year that her mother and her sister died, so that's in the back of her mind when she's talking.
Our modern world places such heavy demands on our time and attention that the need to remember our responsibilities to others is greater than ever. It is often difficult to keep this sense of perspective through the ups and downs of everyday life, as this year has constantly reminded me. I know just how much I rely on my own faith to guide me through the good times and the bad. Each day is a new beginning. I know that the only way to live my life is to try to do what is right, to take the long view, to give of my best in all that the day brings, and to put my trust in God. Like others of you who draw inspiration from your own faith, I draw strength from the message of hope in the Christian gospel. Fortified by this, and the support you have given throughout the last 12 months, which has meant so much to me, I look forward to the new year, to facing the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, and to continuing to serve you to the very best of my ability each and every day.
Okay, any final thoughts or comments about grace? Okay, well, thanks very much. So next week, if you can read chapters 7 and 8, please.